Question 1. Performance analysis shows that a cantonal authority in Switzerland is reviewing an application for a permit to carry a weapon, Waffentragbewilligung. The applicant has provided a written statement detailing their reasons for needing the permit, citing a general feeling of insecurity in their neighborhood. What is the most appropriate approach for the cantonal authority to take in assessing this application, adhering strictly to Swiss weapon law? Option A. Issue the permit based on the applicant's self-declared feeling of insecurity, assuming that a concerned citizen should be granted the means to protect themselves. Option B. Grant the permit if the applicant has no prior criminal record, as this generally indicates a responsible individual. Option C. Focus primarily on the applicant's stated desire to carry a weapon and their belief that it will enhance their personal safety, without extensive independent verification. Option D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment that objectively evaluates the applicant's stated need, verifies supporting evidence, and assesses their overall suitability and potential risks to public safety. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough risk assessment that objectively evaluates the applicant's stated need, verifies supporting evidence, and assesses their overall suitability and potential risks to public safety. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate not only a genuine need for a firearm, but also the capacity to handle it responsibly, all within the strict legal framework of Swiss weapon law. The risk assessment component is crucial, as it directly informs the cantonal authority's decision on whether to grant a permit. Misinterpreting or inadequately addressing the risk assessment can lead to the denial of a permit, or worse, the issuance of a permit to an individual who poses a potential risk. The cantonal authorities must balance the applicant's rights with public safety, necessitating a thorough and objective evaluation. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a comprehensive and objective assessment of the applicant's personal circumstances, motivations, and any potential risks. This includes a detailed examination of the applicant's background, mental and physical fitness, and the specific reasons for seeking a permit. The applicant must provide clear and verifiable evidence to support their stated need for the weapon, and the authorities must conduct due diligence to confirm these claims and identify any red flags. This aligns with the principles of Swiss weapon law, which mandates that permits are granted only to individuals who demonstrate a proven need and are deemed reliable and responsible. The focus is on a holistic evaluation of the applicant's suitability, ensuring that the permit is issued only when public safety is not compromised. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely rely on the applicant's self-declaration of need without independent verification. This fails to meet the due diligence requirements of Swiss law, which expects authorities to actively assess the legitimacy of the stated need and the applicant's overall suitability. It creates a significant risk of issuing permits to individuals who may not have a genuine or lawful reason for carrying a weapon, thereby undermining public safety. Another incorrect approach is to grant the permit based on the applicant's perceived good character without a thorough risk assessment. While good character is a factor, it is insufficient on its own. Swiss law requires a demonstrable need and an assessment of potential risks, not just a general impression of trustworthiness. This approach overlooks potential underlying issues that might not be apparent from a superficial assessment of character. A further incorrect approach is to prioritize the applicant's convenience or perceived right to carry a weapon over public safety concerns. The primary consideration for the authorities must always be the safety of the public. The assessment that unduly favors the applicant's desires without a robust evaluation of potential risks is a failure to adhere to the spirit and letter of Swiss weapon legislation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach permit applications by establishing a clear framework for risk assessment. This framework should include defined criteria for evaluating the applicant's stated need, their background, mental and physical fitness, and any potential indicators of risk. A structured interview process, combined with the requirement for supporting documentation and potentially background checks, is essential. Professionals must remain objective, avoid making assumptions, and always prioritize public safety in their decision-making process, ensuring compliance with the specific requirements of the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons, Waffengesetz. Question 2. The efficiency study reveals that a Swiss cantonal authority responsible for issuing Waffentragbewilligungen is experiencing a backlog. To expedite processing, the authority is considering implementing a new risk assessment protocol for permit applications, Which of the following protocols best balances the applicant's right to carry a weapon with the imperative of public safety, in accordance with Swiss law? Option A. Protocol that focuses primarily on the applicant's perceived demeanor during a brief interview, with limited consideration for official documentation or background checks, to quickly identify potentially unsuitable candidates. Option B. A protocol that prioritizes speed by conducting only a cursory review of the applicant's criminal record and relying heavily on the applicant's self-declaration of good character and need, with minimal independent verification. Option C. Protocol that mandates a comprehensive review of the applicant's criminal record, any documented history of violence or substance abuse, and a thorough assessment of their stated need for carrying a weapon, supported by verifiable evidence, and conducted in strict adherence to the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons. Option D. A protocol that automatically denies permits to individuals belonging to certain demographic groups, regardless of their individual circumstances, or adherence to the legal requirements for a Waffentragbewilligung. The correct answer is C. A protocol that mandates a comprehensive review of the applicant's criminal record, any documented history of violence or substance abuse, and a thorough assessment of their stated need for carrying a weapon, supported by verifiable evidence and conducted in strict adherence to the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential gap in the risk assessment process for permit to carry a weapon, Waffentragbewilligung applications in Switzerland. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the fundamental right to self-defense, as recognized in Swiss law, with the paramount public safety imperative. A flawed risk assessment can lead to either the unjustified denial of a legitimate permit, infringing on individual rights, or the issuance of a permit to an unsuitable individual, posing a significant risk to public safety. Careful judgment is required to ensure a thorough, objective, and legally compliant evaluation of each applicant. The best approach involves a comprehensive review of the applicant's background, focusing on verifiable information and objective criteria as stipulated by the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons, Waffengesetz and its associated ordinances. This includes a meticulous examination of the applicant's criminal record, any history of violence or substance abuse, mental health assessments where relevant and permissible, and a clear demonstration of a genuine need for carrying a weapon, as defined by law. The assessment must be grounded in the principle of proportionality, ensuring that any restrictions on the right to carry a weapon are justified by demonstrable risks to public safety. This approach aligns with the WG's requirement for authorities to assess whether an applicant poses a risk to themselves or others, and whether they have a legitimate need for the weapon. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on subjective impressions or anecdotal evidence without corroborating documentation. This fails to meet the legal standard for a robust risk assessment and can lead to arbitrary decisions. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize expediency over thoroughness, such as rubber stamping applications without adequate scrutiny of supporting documents or conducting necessary background checks. This directly contravenes the WG's mandate for diligent investigation and poses a severe risk to public safety. Furthermore, an approach that automatically denies permits based on broad categories of individuals without individualized assessment, irrespective of their specific circumstances, and adherence to legal requirements, is also professionally unacceptable. This violates the principle of individual rights and due process, as well as the WG's emphasis on assessing each applicant on their merits and demonstrated risks. Professional decision-making in such situations should follow a structured process. First, clearly identify all applicable legal requirements and guidelines from the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons and relevant cantonal regulations. Second, gather all necessary documentation and information pertaining to the applicant's background and stated need. Third, objectively analyze this information against the legal criteria, paying close attention to any red flags or indicators of potential risk. Fourth, document the entire assessment process and the rationale for the decision, ensuring transparency and accountability. Finally, consult with legal counsel or senior officers if any ambiguities or complex issues arise. Question 3. The audit findings indicate that a significant number of applications for a permit to carry a weapon, Waffentragbewilligung, in the canton of Zurich are being processed with a focus on the applicant's stated personal safety concerns, but with insufficient independent verification of the underlying risks and the applicant's suitability. Which approach best aligns with the requirements of Swiss weapons legislation for assessing such applications? Option A. Rely primarily on the applicant's self-declaration of needing a weapon for self-defense, assuming their stated concerns are valid without extensive independent verification or a deeper investigation into their personal circumstances. Option B. Grant the permit based on the applicant's perceived social standing or reputation within their community, assuming that individuals of good standing are inherently suitable for carrying a weapon. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously examines all aspects of the applicant's background and stated need, cross-referencing this information with the specific criteria outlined in the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons, Waffentragbewilligung, and its implementing ordinances, to demonstrate a genuine and current need for self-defense that outweighs the inherent risks. Option D. Prioritize expediting the application process by minimizing the depth of background checks and interviews to ensure a swift turnaround time for applicants. Correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously examines all aspects of the applicant's background and stated need, cross-referencing this information with the specific criteria outlined in the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons, Waffentragbewilligung, and its implementing ordinances, to demonstrate a genuine and current need for self-defense that outweighs the inherent risks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the applicant's stated need for a firearm for self-defense against the stringent requirements of Swiss law, which prioritizes public safety. The risk assessment must be thorough and objective, considering not only the applicant's personal circumstances, but also the potential risks to the community. A superficial assessment could lead to the issuance of a permit to an individual who poses an unacceptable risk, while an overly cautious approach might unfairly deny a legitimate need. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously examines all aspects of the applicant's background and stated need, cross-referencing this information with the specific criteria outlined in the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons, Waffentragbewilligung, and its implementing ordinances. This includes verifying the applicant's stated reasons for needing a weapon, assessing their mental and physical fitness, and thoroughly investigating any past incidents or behaviors that might indicate a propensity for misuse. The focus must be on demonstrating a genuine and current need for self-defense that outweighs the inherent risks associated with carrying a weapon, as mandated by Article 10 of the WG. This approach ensures adherence to the law's intent to permit weapon possession only when justified and safe. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves relying solely on the applicant's self-declaration of needing a weapon for self-defense without independent verification or a deeper investigation into their circumstances. This fails to meet the legal requirement for a thorough assessment and could overlook critical risk factors, potentially leading to the issuance of a permit to an unsuitable individual, thereby violating the public safety mandate of the WG. Another unacceptable approach is to grant the permit based on the applicant's perceived social standing or reputation within their community, without a direct assessment of their individual suitability and the specific justification for carrying a weapon. Swiss law does not permit such generalized assumptions. It demands an individualized assessment of risk and need. This approach bypasses the legal due diligence required by the WG. Finally, an approach that prioritizes expediting the application process over a complete risk assessment is also professionally unsound. While efficiency is desirable, it must not compromise the thoroughness required to ensure public safety. Delaying or omitting crucial investigative steps, such as background checks or interviews, to speed up the process directly contravenes the spirit and letter of the WG, which mandates a careful and deliberate evaluation. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with evaluating permit applications must adopt a structured, evidence-based decision-making process. This begins with a clear understanding of the legal framework, Swiss WG and relevant ordinances. The process should involve gathering all necessary documentation, conducting thorough background checks, interviewing the applicant, and, where appropriate, consulting with relevant authorities. Each piece of information must be critically evaluated against the legal criteria for granting a permit. If any doubt or red flag arises, further investigation is warranted. The final decision must be justifiable based on the evidence and the legal requirements, prioritizing public safety while respecting individual rights. Question 4. The audit findings indicate that a significant number of Waffentragbewilligung applications in the canton of Zurich were approved based primarily on the applicant's self-declaration of being a responsible citizen, with minimal independent verification of their suitability to carry a weapon. Which of the following approaches best reflects the required risk assessment under Swiss law for such applications? Option A. Accept the applicant's self-declaration of reliability without further independent verification, as the burden of proof lies with the applicant to demonstrate unsuitability. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that includes a thorough review of the applicant's personal circumstances, any history of violence or substance abuse, mental health status, and the specific reasons for carrying a weapon, cross-referenced with available official records, and where necessary, further investigation. Option C. Approve the permit if the applicant has no prior criminal convictions, as this is the primary indicator of reliability under Swiss law. Option D. Grant the permit based on the applicant's stated intention for sport shooting, assuming this purpose inherently signifies responsible behavior. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that includes a thorough review of the applicant's personal circumstances, any history of violence or substance abuse, mental health status, and the specific reasons for carrying a weapon, cross-referenced with available official records, and where necessary, further investigation. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential lapse in risk assessment procedures related to the issuance of permits to carry weapons, Waffentragbewilligung, in Switzerland. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons, Waffengesetz, and its associated ordinances, specifically concerning the assessment of an applicant's reliability and the potential risks associated with carrying a weapon. The core of the challenge lies in balancing an individual's right to self-defense or sport with the paramount public safety imperative. A superficial or incomplete risk assessment can have severe consequences, including the potential for misuse of firearms. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive and individualized assessment of the applicant's reliability, taking into account all relevant factors as stipulated by Swiss law. This includes a thorough review of the applicant's personal circumstances, any history of violence or substance abuse, mental health status, and the specific reasons for requesting the permit. The legal framework in Switzerland, particularly Article 8 of the WG, mandates that permits are only granted to individuals who are demonstrably reliable and do not pose a danger to themselves or others. A robust risk assessment, therefore, directly aligns with this legal requirement by proactively identifying and mitigating potential risks before a permit is issued. This approach prioritizes public safety while adhering strictly to the legislative intent. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the absence of a criminal record as sufficient proof of reliability. While a criminal record is a significant factor, Swiss law and ethical considerations demand a more holistic evaluation. The absence of a criminal record does not automatically equate to an individual being free from tendencies that could lead to the misuse of a weapon, such as untreated mental health issues or a history of aggressive behavior not resulting in a conviction. This approach fails to meet the legal standard of demonstrating reliability and poses an unacceptable risk to public safety. Another incorrect approach is to grant the permit based on the applicant's stated intention for sport shooting, without conducting a deeper inquiry into their overall suitability and potential for misuse. While sport shooting is a legitimate reason for obtaining a permit, it does not exempt the applicant from the rigorous reliability assessment required by Article 8 of the WG. Overlooking other potential risk factors in favor of the stated purpose is a failure to conduct a proper risk assessment and could lead to the issuance of a permit to an unsuitable individual. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to delegate the entire risk assessment process to the applicant themselves, accepting their self-declaration of reliability without independent verification or further investigation. This abdication of responsibility is a clear violation of the duty of care incumbent upon the issuing authority and directly contravenes the spirit and letter of the Swiss Waffengesetz. The issuing authority has a legal and ethical obligation to conduct its own thorough assessment, not to simply trust the applicant's word. A professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework that systematically evaluates all statutory criteria for permit issuance. This framework should include clear guidelines for information gathering evidence evaluation, and decision-making, ensuring consistency and adherence to legal requirements. Professionals must be trained to identify red flags, conduct necessary follow-up investigation, and document their assessments thoroughly. When in doubt, seeking expert advice or further information is crucial to uphold public safety and legal compliance. Question 5. Market research demonstrates a growing concern among some individuals in Zurich regarding personal safety. An applicant, citing a general feeling of unease and a desire for enhanced personal security, has applied for a permit to carry a weapon. They have no criminal record and have completed a basic firearms safety course. What is the most appropriate risk assessment approach for the cantonal authorities to take in evaluating this application for a Waffentragbewilligung? Option A. Deny the permit solely because the applicant has no criminal record, as this is the primary indicator of suitability for carrying a weapon. Option B. Grant the permit based on the applicant's subjective feeling of unease and their completion of a firearms safety course, as personal security is a fundamental right. Option C. Conduct a detailed, objective assessment of the applicant's specific circumstances, verifying any alleged threats, exploring alternative security measures, and evaluating the applicant's overall reliability and suitability to determine if a genuine and demonstrable need exists beyond a generalized sense of insecurity. Option D. Issue the permit based on the applicant's profession, assuming that individuals in certain roles inherently face higher risks, requiring immediate armed protection. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed, objective assessment of the applicant's specific circumstances, verifying any alleged threats, exploring alternative security measures, and evaluating the applicant's overall reliability and suitability to determine if a genuine and demonstrable need exists beyond a generalized sense of insecurity. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing an individual's right to self-defense with the stringent public safety requirements mandated by Swiss weapons law. The applicant's stated reasons for seeking a permit to carry a weapon must be assessed against objective criteria to determine if they constitute a genuine and demonstrable need, rather than mere personal preference or a generalized sense of insecurity. The assessment demands careful consideration of the applicant's personal circumstances, the specific threats they face, and the proportionality of carrying a weapon as a solution. The best approach involves a thorough, objective, and documented risk assessment that directly addresses the applicant's stated reasons for needing to carry a weapon. This means meticulously evaluating the credibility and severity of any alleged threats, considering alternative security measures, and verifying the applicant's suitability and training. This approach aligns with the principles of Swiss weapons law, which requires a demonstrable need and a high standard of personal reliability and safety awareness. The law emphasizes that permits are not granted lightly and are contingent upon proving a genuine necessity that cannot be met through less intrusive means. An incorrect approach would be to grant the permit based solely on the applicant's subjective fear or a generalized statement of needing protection, without independent verification or objective evidence of a specific, credible threat. This fails to meet the legal requirement of demonstrating a genuine need and could compromise public safety by arming individuals who do not meet the stringent criteria. Another incorrect approach is to deny the permit solely because the applicant has no prior criminal record, without a comprehensive assessment of their stated reasons and the potential risks. While a clean record is a prerequisite, it is not, in itself, sufficient justification for granting a permit. The law requires more than just the absence of negative indicators. It demands the presence of positive justification for carrying a weapon. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to rely on the applicant's perceived social standing or profession as a sole basis for granting the permit, without independently verifying the specific risks associated with their situation. Swiss law focuses on objective needs and demonstrable threats, not on assumptions based on an individual's status. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the legal requirements for a Waffentragbewilligung in Switzerland. This involves gathering all relevant information from the applicant, conducting independent verification of any claims made, assessing the credibility and severity of any perceived threats, and considering the availability and effectiveness of alternative security measures. The decision must be based on objective evidence and a thorough risk assessment, ensuring that public safety is paramount while respecting the applicant's rights within the legal framework. Question 6. The assessment process reveals an applicant for a Swiss Waffentragbewilligung has a history of minor altercations and a recent, albeit resolved, dispute with a neighbor. Which of the following represents the most appropriate risk assessment strategy? Option A. Focus solely on the absence of any criminal convictions, disregarding any documented behavioral issues or disputes that have been resolved. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's history, considering the nature, context, and resolution of past incidents, alongside an evaluation of their current reliability and trustworthiness. Option C. Automatically deny the permit due to the presence of past altercations, irrespective of their severity or resolution. Option D. Grant the permit based on the applicant's stated need for self-defense, provided there are no current criminal convictions. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's history, considering the nature, context, and resolution of past incidents, alongside an evaluation of their current reliability and trustworthiness. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a complex scenario involving an applicant for a Swiss Waffentragbewilligung, permit to carry a weapon, who has a history of minor altercations and a recent, albeit resolved, dispute with a neighbor. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced risk assessment that balances the applicant's right to self-defense and lawful firearm ownership against the public's safety and the stringent requirements of Swiss weapons law. The assessor must go beyond a simple checklist and delve into the underlying nature of the applicant's past behavior and their current suitability. The best approach involves a thorough, individualized assessment of the applicant's overall reliability and trustworthiness, considering the context and severity of past incidents. This means not just noting the existence of past altercations, but understanding their nature, frequency, and whether they indicate a propensity for violence or a disregard for the law. The assessor should seek to understand the applicant's current mental state, their reasons for seeking the permit, and any evidence of rehabilitation or changed behavior. This aligns with the spirit of the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons Waffengesetz, WG, and its implementing ordinances, which mandate that permits be granted only to individuals who are demonstrably reliable and do not pose a risk to themselves or others. The focus is on a holistic evaluation of character and current disposition, as required by the law's emphasis on reliability, Zuverlässigkeit, an approach that automatically denies the permit based solely on the presence of any past altercations, regardless of their nature, recency, or resolution, fails to meet the individualized assessment requirement. This is a regulatory failure, as it bypasses the nuanced judgment mandated by the WG. Similarly, an approach that prioritizes the applicant's stated need for self-defense without a rigorous evaluation of their past behavior and potential risk to public safety is ethically unsound and a violation of the WG's intent to prevent misuse of firearms. Finally, an approach that relies solely on the absence of a criminal conviction, ignoring documented behavioral issues that might indicate unreliability, is a significant regulatory oversight. The law requires more than just a clean criminal record. It demands a proactive assessment of an individual's character and propensity for responsible behavior. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive review of all submitted documentation. This should be followed by targeted inquiries to clarify any ambiguities or concerning aspects of the applicant's history. Where necessary, interviews with the applicant are crucial to gauge their demeanor, understanding of responsibilities, and current mental state. The assessor must then weigh all gathered information against the legal criteria for reliability and trustworthiness, making a reasoned decision based on the totality of the evidence, not on isolated incidents or assumptions. Question 7. Cost-benefit analysis shows that, while the administrative burden of processing permit applications is significant, the primary objective of the Swiss Waffentragbewilligung, permit to carry a weapon, is to ensure public safety by strictly regulating who can carry firearms. Considering this, what is the most appropriate approach for an official responsible for assessing an application for a permit to carry a weapon in Switzerland? Option A. Prove the permit based on the applicant's history of responsible firearm ownership and previous permits, assuming their need for self-defense remains constant. Option B. Conduct a thorough risk assessment that meticulously documents the applicant's specific, demonstrable, and current threats, evaluating the credibility and severity of these threats and the inadequacy of alternative protective measures. Option C. Issue the permit automatically to individuals holding certain professions deemed to be at higher risk, irrespective of their personal threat assessment. Option D. Grant the permit based on the applicant's subjective fear of crime and general concerns about the safety of their neighborhood, without requiring specific evidence of direct threats. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough risk assessment that meticulously documents the applicant's specific, demonstrable, and current threats, evaluating the credibility and severity of these threats and the inadequacy of alternative protective measures. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the legitimate need for self-protection with the stringent legal requirements and public safety concerns associated with carrying a firearm in Switzerland. The Waffentragbewilligung, permit to carry a weapon, is not a right but a privilege granted under strict conditions, necessitating a thorough and objective assessment of risk. Failure to adhere to these conditions can have severe legal consequences and compromise public safety. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously documents the applicant's specific, demonstrable, and current threats. This approach aligns with the principles of the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons, Waffengesetz, and its associated ordinances, which require authorities to verify a genuine and pressing need for carrying a weapon for self-defense. This involves evaluating the credibility and severity of threats, the applicant's vulnerability, and the inadequacy of alternative protective measures. The focus is on objective evidence and a clear, demonstrable link between the threats and the necessity of carrying a weapon. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on the applicant's subjective fear or general concerns about crime rates in their area. This fails to meet the legal standard of a specific, demonstrable, and current threat. The WG emphasizes objective justification, not generalized anxiety. Another incorrect approach is to grant the permit based on the applicant's profession alone, without a specific assessment of personal risk. While certain professions might inherently carry higher risks, the permit is for individual self-defense, not for general occupational safety, and requires a personalized threat assessment. A further incorrect approach is to approve the permit based on the applicant's past ownership of firearms or previous permits, without re-evaluating the current threat landscape. The assessment must be current and relevant to the applicant's present circumstances. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic and evidence-based approach. This involves clearly defining the criteria for a genuine and pressing need as stipulated by Swiss law, gathering objective evidence to support or refute the applicant's claims, and critically evaluating the credibility and severity of any alleged threats. The decision-making process should be transparent, documented, and defensible, ensuring that permits are issued only when legally mandated and public safety is not compromised. Question 8. Operational review demonstrates that a cantonal authority in Switzerland is processing an application for a permit to carry a weapon, Waffentragbewilligung. The applicant has provided a stated reason for needing the permit, but the reviewing officer has some initial concerns about the applicant's past behavior, which is not directly related to criminal convictions, but involves documented instances of aggressive interpersonal conduct. What is the most appropriate risk assessment approach for the cantonal authority to adopt? Option A. Conduct a thorough investigation into the applicant's past behavior, seeking corroborating evidence and assessing its relevance to the criteria of reliability as defined by the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons, while also verifying the legitimacy of the stated purpose. Option B. Deny the permit solely on the basis of the documented aggressive interpersonal conduct, without further investigation or consideration of the applicant's stated purpose, as such behavior inherently indicates unreliability. Option C. Focus exclusively on verifying the applicant's stated purpose for carrying a weapon and disregard the documented instances of aggressive interpersonal conduct, assuming they are not directly relevant to the permit application. Option D. Grant the permit immediately based on the applicant's stated legitimate need, as the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons does not explicitly prohibit permits for individuals with documented instances of aggressive interpersonal conduct if no criminal convictions exist. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough investigation into the applicant's past behavior, seeking corroborating evidence and assessing its relevance to the criteria of reliability as defined by the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons, while also verifying the legitimacy of the stated purpose. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the applicant's stated need for a permit to carry a weapon in Switzerland with the fundamental obligation of the cantonal authorities to assess the applicant's reliability and the potential risks to public safety. The cantonal authorities must navigate the specific legal requirements of the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons, Waffengesetz, and its associated ordinances, which mandate a thorough assessment of an individual's suitability without unduly infringing on the rights of law-abiding citizens. The decision-making process is complex as it involves subjective elements of risk assessment alongside objective legal criteria. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously examines the applicant's stated purpose for carrying a weapon, corroborates this with objective evidence where possible, and thoroughly investigates any potential indicators of unreliability as defined by the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons. This includes scrutinizing the applicant's criminal record, mental health history, if relevant and legally accessible, and any past incidents that might suggest a propensity for violence or misuse of a weapon. The authorities must then weigh these findings against the specific requirements for issuing a permit, ensuring that the applicant demonstrably meets the criteria for reliability and that the intended use is legitimate and does not pose an undue risk. This aligns with the WG's emphasis on ensuring that only reliable individuals are granted permits, thereby safeguarding public safety. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to grant the permit solely based on the applicant's assertion of a legitimate need without conducting any independent verification or risk assessment. This fails to uphold the cantonal authorities' duty to assess reliability and could lead to a weapon being issued to an individual who poses a risk, directly contravening the spirit and letter of the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons. Another incorrect approach would be to deny the permit summarily based on a generalized concern about weapon ownership without a specific, documented reason related to the applicant's individual unreliability or a demonstrable lack of a legitimate need. This would be an arbitrary decision, failing to adhere to the legal framework that allows for permits under specific conditions and potentially infringing on the rights of a suitable applicant. A further incorrect approach would be to focus exclusively on the applicant's stated need without adequately investigating potential red flags in their background, such as past behavioral issues or concerning statements made during the application process. This selective investigation creates a significant gap in the risk assessment, potentially overlooking critical information that would deem the applicant unreliable under the WG. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with evaluating permit applications for carrying weapons in Switzerland must adopt a systematic and evidence-based approach. This involves understanding the specific provisions of the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons and relevant cantonal regulations. Process should begin with a clear understanding of the applicant's stated purpose and then proceed to a thorough background check, focusing on factors that determine reliability. Any discrepancies or concerning information must be investigated further. The decision should be based on a holistic assessment of all available information, ensuring that the applicant meets the legal requirements for reliability and that the permit is issued only when public safety is not compromised. This structured approach ensures fairness to the applicant while prioritizing the safety of the community. Question 9. The monitoring system flags a Swiss Waffentragbewilligung holder based on an anonymous tip alleging aggressive behavior in a public place. What is the most appropriate next step for the cantonal authorities responsible for issuing the permit? Option A. Initiate a formal investigation by gathering all available objective information, including contacting the relevant police authorities for any official reports or records related to the alleged incident, and assessing if the reported behavior constitutes grounds for suspension or revocation under Article 10 of the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons. Option B. Contact the permit holder directly to inquire about the anonymous tip without first verifying its credibility or seeking official corroboration. Option C. Disregard the anonymous tip as unsubstantiated and take no further action unless more concrete evidence emerges. Option D. Immediately suspend the Waffentragbewilligung pending further investigation, citing the anonymous tip as sufficient cause for concern. Correct answer is A. Initiate a formal investigation by gathering all available objective information, including contacting the relevant police authorities for any official reports or records related to the alleged incident, and assessing if the reported behavior constitutes grounds for suspension or revocation under Article 10 of the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons. Explanation: the monitoring system demonstrates a potential lapse in adherence to Swiss weapon permit regulations. The scenario presents a challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons, Waffengesetz, WG, and its associated ordinances, specifically concerning the conditions under which a permit to carry a weapon, Waffentragbewilligung, can be revoked or suspended, and the procedural safeguards involved. The core of the challenge lies in balancing public safety with the rights of the permit holder, necessitating a thorough and objective risk assessment. The best professional approach involves a systematic and documented review of all available information pertaining to the permit holder's conduct and any reported incidents. This includes consulting official police reports, any relevant judicial proceedings, and direct communication with law enforcement agencies to ascertain the nature and severity of the alleged misconduct. The decision to suspend or revoke a permit must be based on concrete evidence that the individual no longer meets the criteria for possessing a weapon, such as demonstrating a propensity for violence or posing a risk to public safety, as stipulated by Article 10 of the WG. This approach ensures that any action taken is legally sound, proportionate, and grounded in objective risk assessment, thereby upholding both public safety and due process. An incorrect approach would be to immediately suspend the permit based solely on an unsubstantiated rumor or a minor infraction that does not inherently indicate a threat to public safety. This fails to adhere to the principle of proportionality and the requirement for evidence-based decision-making mandated by Swiss law. Another incorrect approach is to delay the assessment indefinitely, thereby failing to act on potentially credible information that could pose a risk to public safety. This inaction could be interpreted as negligence and a failure to fulfill the duty of care inherent in managing weapon permits. Furthermore, relying on subjective impressions or personal biases rather than objective facts and official reports constitutes a significant ethical and regulatory failure, as it undermines the integrity and fairness of the permit system. Professionals in this field should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes objective evidence gathering, thorough risk assessment against legal criteria, and adherence to procedural fairness. This involves establishing clear protocols for reporting, investigating, and adjudicating concerns related to weapon permit holders, ensuring that all decisions are documented, justifiable, and consistent with the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons and its implementing ordinances. Question 10. System analysis indicates that a resident of the Canton of Zurich is applying for a permit to carry a weapon, Waffentragbewilligung. The base fee for the permit is CHF 150. The applicant's risk assessment places them in the moderate risk category, which incurs a 25% surcharge on the base fee. Additionally, there is a standard administrative fee of CHF 20 for processing applications. What is the total fee that should be charged for this permit application? Option A, CHF 187.50. Option B, CHF 180.00. Option C, CHF 170.00. Option D, CHF 207.50. The correct answer is D, CHF 207.50. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in accurately calculating the required fees for a permit to carry a weapon, Waffentragbewilligung, in Switzerland, specifically within the Canton of Zurich. The complexity arises from the tiered fee structure based on the applicant's risk assessment and the potential for additional administrative costs. Miscalculation can lead to financial discrepancies, delays in processing, and potential noncompliance with cantonal fee regulations, impacting both the applicant and the issuing authority. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a meticulous calculation that accounts for the base fee, the risk-based surcharge, and any potential administrative overhead. This approach ensures adherence to the specific fee schedule outlined by the Canton of Zurich's relevant ordinances. For instance, if the base fee is CHF 150 and the risk assessment places the applicant in the moderate risk category, which incurs a 25% surcharge, and there's an additional administrative charge of CHF 20, the total would be calculated as base fee plus base fee asterisk risk surcharge percentage plus administrative charge CHF 150 plus CHF 150 asterisk 0.25 plus CHF 20 equals CHF 150 plus CHF 37. 50 plus CHF 20 equals CHF 207. 50. This method directly applies the stipulated fee structure, ensuring accuracy and compliance with cantonal financial regulations for weapon permits. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to simply apply the base fee without considering the risk assessment. This fails to comply with the cantonal requirement for a tiered fee structure that reflects the potential risk associated with issuing a permit. It would result in undercharging and a violation of the specific fee regulations. Another incorrect approach would be to add a flat percentage surcharge to the base fee without referencing the specific risk categories defined by the Canton of Zurich. This lacks the precision required by the ordinance and could lead to either overcharging or undercharging, both of which are professionally unacceptable. A further incorrect approach would be to only consider the base fee and ignore any potential additional administrative costs that might be incurred during the processing of the application, such as for background checks or specific documentation requirements. This oversight would lead to an incomplete calculation and non-compliance with the full fee obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a systematic approach to fee calculation. This involves 1. Identifying the relevant cantonal ordinance governing weapon permit fees. 2. Determining the base fee for the permit. 3. Accurately assessing the applicant's risk category as defined by the ordinance. 4. Applying the correct risk-based surcharge percentage to the base fee. 5. Factoring in any stipulated administrative or processing fees. 6. Performing the calculation using the precise formula provided or implied by the regulations. 7. Documenting the calculation process for transparency and auditability. Question 11. Implementation of the Swiss Waffentragbewilligung process requires careful consideration of applicant history. If an applicant for a permit to carry a weapon in the Canton of Zurich discloses a history of treatment for a mental health condition, what is the most appropriate next step for the licensing authority? Option A. Demand access to the applicant's complete medical records from all past healthcare providers. Option B. Request a current medical certificate from the applicant's treating physician, detailing their current mental state, the nature of past treatment, and the physician's professional opinion on their fitness to carry a weapon. Option C. Automatically deny the permit application due to the applicant's disclosed history of mental health treatment. Option D. Accept a general statement from the applicant that they are currently feeling well and have no ongoing issues. The correct answer is B. Request a current medical certificate from the applicant's treating physician, detailing their current mental state, the nature of past treatment, and the physician's professional opinion on their fitness to carry a weapon. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge in navigating the nuanced requirements for obtaining a Swiss Waffentragbewilligung permit to carry a weapon when an applicant has a history of mental health treatment. The core difficulty lies in balancing the applicant's right to privacy and potential for rehabilitation with the public safety mandate inherent in firearms licensing. Careful judgment is required to ensure that decisions are based on objective risk assessment rather than stigma or assumptions. The best professional approach involves a thorough, individualized assessment of the applicant's current mental state and the specific nature of their past treatment. This approach prioritizes gathering comprehensive, up-to-date information directly relevant to the applicant's fitness to carry a weapon. It requires obtaining a current medical certificate from a treating physician, detailing the diagnosis, treatment duration, current stability, and the physician's professional opinion on the applicant's suitability to possess and carry a firearm without posing a risk to themselves or others. This aligns with the principle of proportionality and evidence-based decision-making, ensuring that the permit is granted or denied based on a concrete assessment of risk, as implied by the spirit of Swiss weapon laws, which aim to balance individual rights with public safety. An incorrect approach would be to automatically deny the permit based solely on the applicant's disclosure of past mental health treatment. This fails to acknowledge that mental health conditions are treatable and that individuals can achieve stable remission. Such an approach risks violating anti-discrimination principles and overlooks the requirement for an individualized risk assessment. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on a general statement from the applicant that they are feeling better without any supporting medical documentation. This lacks the necessary objective evidence to satisfy the authorities that the applicant poses no undue risk. The law requires more than self-assessment. It demands professional medical validation. Finally, An incorrect approach would be to request access to the applicant's entire medical history without a clear, specific justification tied to the current assessment of firearm suitability. This would be an overreach and a violation of the applicant's privacy rights, exceeding the scope of what is necessary to determine eligibility for a Waffentragbewilligung. The professional reasoning process should involve understanding the legal framework for weapon permits in Switzerland, which emphasizes public safety and requires a demonstration of fitness. When faced with information about past mental health issues, the professional must adopt a structured approach. First, acknowledge the disclosure. Second, seek current, relevant medical evidence. Third, assess this evidence objectively against the criteria for permit issuance. And fourth, make a decision based on this comprehensive, individualized assessment, always respecting the applicant's privacy while upholding public safety. Question 12. To address the challenge of assessing an applicant's genuine need for a permit to carry a weapon, Waffentragbewilligung, in the canton of Zurich, which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of Swiss weapons law and responsible implementation? Option A. Issue the permit based on the applicant's subjective fear of harm and their personal assertion that they face threats, without undertaking independent verification of these claims. Option B. Conduct a thorough investigation into the applicant's reported threats, seeking independent corroboration where feasible, assessing their psychological suitability, and critically evaluating the proportionality of carrying a weapon as a solution, all while strictly adhering to the criteria in the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons. Option C. Deny the application immediately if the applicant appears nervous or emotionally distressed during the interview, interpreting this as a sign of instability. Option D. Refuse the permit solely based on the applicant's record of minor administrative offenses, such as a past parking violation, without considering their relevance to the criteria for carrying a weapon. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough investigation into the applicant's reported threats, seeking independent corroboration where feasible, assessing their psychological suitability, and critically evaluating the proportionality of carrying a weapon as a solution, all while strictly adhering to the criteria in the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a cantonal weapons office official in Switzerland. The challenge lies in balancing the applicant's stated need for self-defense against potential threats with the stringent requirements for obtaining a permit to carry a weapon, Waffentragbewilligung. The official must meticulously assess the applicant's credibility, the genuine nature of the perceived threat, and whether the proposed carrying of a weapon is a proportionate and necessary measure, all within the framework of Swiss weapons law. Misjudging the situation could lead to either an unwarranted issuance of a permit, potentially compromising public safety, or an unjustified denial, infringing upon an individual's rights if their concerns are legitimate. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough, documented investigation into the applicant's claims and circumstances. This includes verifying the reported threats through independent means where possible, assessing the applicant's psychological stability and past behavior, and critically evaluating the proportionality of carrying a weapon as a solution to the perceived problem. The official must adhere strictly to the criteria outlined in the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons, Waffengesetz and its implementing ordinances, particularly concerning the demonstration of a genuine need, Bedürfnis, and the absence of any grounds for refusal. This approach ensures that the decision is based on objective evidence and legal requirements, safeguarding both public safety and individual rights. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to grant the permit based solely on the applicant's subjective fear and assertion of threats without independent verification. This fails to meet the legal requirement of demonstrating a genuine need, which necessitates more than mere apprehension. It bypasses the due diligence expected of a cantonal authority and could lead to a permit being issued to someone who does not genuinely require it for self-defense in a legally recognized sense. Another incorrect approach is to summarily dismiss the application due to the applicant's perceived nervousness or emotional state during the interview. While an official should observe demeanor, a decision to deny a permit must be based on concrete, legally relevant grounds for refusal, not on subjective interpretations of an applicant's emotional response to a stressful situation. This approach risks penalizing an applicant for understandable anxiety rather than for failing to meet objective legal criteria. A third incorrect approach is to focus excessively on the applicant's past minor infractions, such as a parking ticket, as grounds for refusal. While certain criminal convictions or behaviors can be grounds for refusal, minor administrative offenses that do not indicate a propensity for violence or a disregard for the law are generally not sufficient to deny a permit to carry a weapon under Swiss law. This approach misapplies the grounds for refusal and demonstrates a lack of understanding of the specific criteria for denying a Waffentragbewilligung. Professional reasoning. Professionals in cantonal weapons offices should employ a structured decision-making process. This involves 1. Clearly identifying the legal requirements and grounds for granting or refusing a permit as stipulated by the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons. 2. Conducting a comprehensive and objective investigation, gathering evidence to support or refute the applicant's claims. 3. Critically evaluating the gathered information against the legal criteria, focusing on the genuine need and the absence of refusal grounds. 4. Documenting every step of the process and the rationale for the final decision. 5. Consulting with supervisors or legal counsel when faced with complex or ambiguous cases. This systematic approach ensures fairness, legality, and public safety. Question 13. The review process indicates that an applicant for a Waffentragbewilligung in the Canton of Zurich has submitted an application that lacks specific justification for their need to carry a weapon. Which of the following approaches best addresses this deficiency and aligns with Swiss legal requirements for obtaining such a permit? Option A. The applicant should present a hypothetical scenario of potential future risks that they believe might arise, without concrete present evidence. Option B. The applicant should provide detailed documentation of specific, verifiable threats or circumstances that necessitate their carrying a weapon for personal protection, supported by official reports or credible evidence. Option C. The applicant should emphasize their extensive training and experience in firearms handling, along with a spotless criminal record, as evidence of their responsible nature. Option D. The applicant should articulate a general feeling of insecurity and a desire for enhanced personal safety in their daily life. The correct answer is B. The applicant should provide detailed documentation of specific, verifiable threats or circumstances that necessitate their carrying a weapon for personal protection, supported by official reports or credible evidence. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential gap in the applicant's understanding of the Swiss Waffentragbewilligung, permit to carry a weapon application process, specifically concerning the demonstration of a genuine need. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to articulate a compelling, legally recognized reason for carrying a weapon, which goes beyond mere personal preference or a generalized sense of insecurity. The authorities are tasked with balancing individual rights with public safety, necessitating a rigorous assessment of each application. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting and presenting evidence that directly supports a recognized legitimate need for carrying a weapon, as defined by Swiss law. This includes providing concrete examples of threats or circumstances that necessitate constant protection, supported by official reports, credible witness statements, or other verifiable documentation. The justification for this approach lies in its direct adherence to the legal requirements of the Waffentragbewilligung, which mandates a demonstrable and specific need. This ensures that permits are issued only to individuals who can prove a genuine and pressing requirement for carrying a weapon, thereby upholding public safety standards. An incorrect approach would be to rely on vague assertions of personal safety concerns without providing specific, verifiable evidence. This fails to meet the legal threshold for demonstrating a legitimate need, as it lacks the concrete proof required by the authorities. Another incorrect approach is to focus on the applicant's proficiency with firearms or their clean criminal record as the primary justification. While these are important factors in the overall assessment, they do not, in themselves, establish a legitimate need to carry a weapon, which is a separate and distinct requirement. A further incorrect approach is to present hypothetical future threats without any present evidence or immediate danger. The law generally requires a demonstrable current need, not speculative future risks. Professionals should approach such applications by first thoroughly understanding the specific legal definition of legitimate need within the relevant Swiss cantonal legislation. They should then guide the applicant in gathering all available, verifiable evidence that directly addresses this definition, focusing on specificity and factual accuracy. This systematic process ensures that the application is grounded in legal requirements and presented in a manner that facilitates a fair and informed decision by the authorities. Question 14. Examination of the data shows a Swiss applicant has submitted a request for a Waffentragbewilligung permit to carry a weapon in the canton of Zurich, citing a vague concern for personal safety due to their profession as a freelance journalist covering sensitive topics. The applicant has no prior criminal record. What is the most appropriate course of action for the cantonal authorities to take in evaluating this application? Option A. Conduct a detailed investigation into the specific threats or risks the applicant faces, verify the necessity of carrying a weapon for their protection, and thoroughly assess their reliability and suitability based on documented evidence and legal criteria. Option B. Deny the permit outright due to the inherent risks associated with weapon carrying, regardless of the applicant's specific circumstances. Option C. Issue the permit immediately based on the applicant's profession and lack of criminal record, assuming their concern for personal safety is sufficient justification. Option D. Grant the permit based on the applicant's personal assurance of responsible use and a brief conversation about their perceived safety concerns. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed investigation into the specific threats or risks the applicant faces, verify the necessity of carrying a weapon for their protection, and thoroughly assess their reliability and suitability based on documented evidence and legal criteria. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an applicant to demonstrate not only a genuine need for carrying a weapon, but also to navigate the subjective assessment of their trustworthiness and the potential risks associated with their application. The cantonal authorities must balance the applicant's rights with public safety concerns, making the evaluation process critical and prone to differing interpretations of the legal requirements. Correct approach analysis. The most appropriate approach involves a thorough and documented assessment of the applicant's stated need for carrying a weapon, cross-referenced with objective evidence and a comprehensive background check. This aligns with the principles of the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons, Waffengesetz and its implementing ordinances, which require authorities to verify the necessity and the applicant's reliability. A detailed report that outlines the specific circumstances justifying the permit, the applicant's personal history, and any potential risks provides a solid, defensible basis for decision-making. This approach ensures that the permit is granted only when legally mandated and that public safety is adequately considered, adhering to the spirit and letter of Swiss weapon law. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to grant the permit based solely on the applicant's assertion of a need without independent verification. This fails to meet the legal requirement for demonstrating necessity and opens the door to potential misuse of weapons, violating the WG's emphasis on responsible ownership and public safety. Another flawed approach would be to deny the permit based on a generalized concern about weapon carrying, without specific evidence of the applicant's unreliability or lack of genuine need. This could infringe upon the rights of individuals who legitimately require a permit under the law and may not be justifiable under the WG's provisions. Finally, relying on informal assurances or personal acquaintance with the applicant without a formal, documented assessment process is professionally unacceptable. This bypasses the established legal procedures for evaluating permit applications, undermines the integrity of the permitting system, and fails to provide the necessary documentation for accountability and review, thereby contravening the WG's procedural requirements. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with evaluating permit applications for carrying weapons in Switzerland should adopt a systematic and evidence-based approach. This involves clearly defining the criteria for necessity, as stipulated by the WG, conducting thorough background checks, and documenting all findings and justifications for their decision. When faced with ambiguity, seeking clarification from legal counsel or senior authorities is advisable. The decision-making process must prioritize adherence to the law, objective assessment, and the paramount importance of public safety. Question 15. Upon reviewing an application for a permit to carry a weapon Waffentragbewilligung in the canton of Zurich, an official notes that the applicant expresses significant anxiety about personal safety due to recent, but unconfirmed, reports of increased crime in their neighborhood. The applicant has no prior criminal record and has not experienced any direct threats or incidents. What is the most appropriate course of action for the official to take? Option A. Issue a provisional permit while further informal inquiries are made with local community leaders. Option B. Grant the permit based on the applicant's expressed fear and desire for self-defense, as personal safety is a paramount concern. Option C. Request detailed documentation from the applicant, such as police reports or evidence of specific threats, and conduct independent verification of the claimed threat before making a decision. Option D. Deny the permit immediately due to the general increase in reported crime in the area, as this indicates a potential risk. The correct answer is C. Request detailed documentation from the applicant, such as police reports or evidence of specific threats, and conduct independent verification of the claimed threat before making a decision. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a cantonal weapons office official in Switzerland. The challenge lies in balancing the applicant's stated need for a permit to carry a weapon for self-defense against the stringent requirements and potential risks associated with such permits. The official must meticulously assess the applicant's credibility, the genuine nature of their perceived threat, and their suitability to carry a firearm, all within the framework of Swiss weapons law. Failure to conduct a thorough and objective assessment could lead to the issuance of a permit to an individual who poses a risk to public safety or to denying a legitimate need, causing undue hardship. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive and objective assessment of the applicant's situation, focusing on verifiable evidence of a concrete and immediate threat. This approach requires the official to request detailed documentation from the applicant, such as police reports, evidence of prior threats or incidents, and potentially a psychological evaluation if concerns arise about the applicant's stability. The official must then independently verify the information provided and consult relevant cantonal and federal authorities. This aligns with the principles of the Swiss federal law on weapons, Waffengesetz, and the associated ordinances, which mandate that permits to carry a weapon, Waffentragbewilligung, are granted only when there is a demonstrable and current need for self-defense, and the applicant is deemed reliable and not a danger. The emphasis is on objective proof of threat, not subjective fear alone. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves granting the permit based solely on the applicant's subjective fear and stated desire for self-defense, without demanding concrete evidence of a specific threat. This fails to meet the legal requirement of a demonstrable and current need, potentially placing a firearm in the hands of someone who does not meet the strict criteria, thereby violating the WG's intent to prevent misuse. Another incorrect approach is to summarily deny the permit based on a general concern about the proliferation of weapons, without a thorough investigation into the applicant's specific circumstances and the validity of their claimed threat. This approach risks overlooking a genuine need for self-defense and may not be in line with the WG's provisions for granting permits under specific, justified circumstances. A further incorrect approach is to rely on informal assurances from the applicant or their acquaintances without seeking official documentation or conducting independent verification. This bypasses the due diligence required by the WG and opens the door to misrepresentation, compromising the integrity of the permitting process and potentially leading to the issuance of a permit to an unsuitable individual. Professional reasoning. Professionals in cantonal weapons offices should adopt a systematic, evidence-based decision-making process. This involves 1. Clearly understanding the legal requirements of the Swiss federal law on weapons and relevant cantonal ordinances. 2. Actively soliciting and critically evaluating all submitted documentation, seeking corroborating evidence where necessary. 3. Conducting independent inquiries and consulting with other relevant authorities when appropriate. 4. Maintaining objectivity and impartiality, distinguishing between subjective fear and objectively verifiable threats. 5. Documenting every step of the decision-making process thoroughly. This structured approach ensures compliance with the law, promotes public safety, and upholds the fairness of the permitting system. Question 16. When evaluating an application for a permit to carry a weapon, Waffentragbewilligung, in the canton of Zurich, what is the most professionally sound approach to assessing the applicant's stated need for self-defense? Option A. Issue the permit without further inquiry beyond the initial application form, assuming that meeting the basic eligibility criteria is sufficient proof of suitability. Option B. Conduct a thorough, individualized assessment of the applicant's stated need for self-defense, corroborating their claims with objective evidence and a comprehensive evaluation of their personal circumstances and reliability. Option C. Deny the permit outright if the applicant resides in a municipality with a statistically low crime rate, regardless of their specific personal circumstances or fears. Option D. Grant the permit based solely on the applicant's subjective assertion of fear and the absence of a criminal record, provided all administrative requirements are met. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough, individualized assessment of the applicant's stated need for self-defense, corroborating their claims with objective evidence, and a comprehensive evaluation of their personal circumstances and reliability. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a cantonal weapons office official in Switzerland. The challenge lies in balancing the applicant's stated need for a permit to carry a weapon for self-defense against the inherent risks associated with such permits and the strict legal requirements for their issuance. The official must meticulously assess the applicant's genuine need, their reliability, and their understanding of weapon handling and safety, all within the framework of Swiss weapons law. A failure to do so could result in the issuance of a permit to an unsuitable individual, potentially leading to tragic consequences, or, conversely, unjustly denying a legitimate request. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough, individualized assessment of the applicant's stated need for self-defense, corroborated by objective evidence, and a comprehensive evaluation of their personal circumstances and reliability. This approach directly aligns with the principles of the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons, Waffengesetz, WG, and its implementing ordinances, which require a demonstrable need and a high degree of personal reliability for the issuance of a permit to carry a weapon. The official must verify the applicant's claims through documentation and potentially interviews, ensuring that the perceived threat is credible and that the applicant is not prone to impulsive or aggressive behavior. This meticulous verification process is crucial for upholding public safety and adhering to the spirit and letter of the law. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves granting the permit based solely on the applicant's subjective assertion of fear and the absence of a criminal record. While a clean record is a prerequisite, it does not automatically establish the genuine need or the applicant's overall reliability in handling a weapon under stress. Swiss law requires more than just the absence of disqualifying factors. It demands positive evidence of a legitimate need and suitability. Another unacceptable approach is to deny the permit solely because the applicant lives in an area with a perceived low crime rate, without a deeper investigation into the specific nature of their fears or any documented threats. The law does not mandate that a permit be denied based on general statistics. Rather, it requires an assessment of the individual's specific circumstances and the credibility of their perceived threat. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to issue the permit without any further inquiry beyond the initial application form, assuming that if the applicant meets the basic criteria, they are automatically suitable. This bypasses the critical due diligence required to ensure the applicant is truly reliable and understands the grave responsibilities associated with carrying a weapon. Professional reasoning. Professionals in cantonal weapons offices must adopt a risk-based, evidence-driven decision-making process. This involves 1. Understanding the legal framework, WG, and relevant ordinances and its intent. 2. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment of the applicant, considering both objective factors, e.g., documented threats, and subjective factors, e.g., credible fear, personal history. 3. Requiring and verifying supporting documentation. 4. Employing interview techniques to gauge reliability and understanding. 5. Documenting the entire decision-making process thoroughly. The ultimate goal is to make an informed decision that upholds public safety while respecting individual rights within the bounds of the law. Question 17. The analysis reveals that an applicant for a Swiss Waffentragbewilligung has a record of 2 minor traffic violations from 5 years ago and a single instance of public intoxication 3 years ago. The applicant has no other criminal record and has provided character references attesting to their responsible behavior. What is the most appropriate course of action for the cantonal authority responsible for issuing the permit? Option A. Grant the permit without further consideration, assuming that minor past offenses do not preclude an individual from carrying a weapon. Option B. Request a new set of character references specifically addressing the past infractions before making a decision. Option C. automatically deny the permit due to the presence of any past infractions, regardless of their severity or age. Option D. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's entire history, including the nature and recency of the past infractions, alongside the provided character references, to assess overall reliability for carrying a weapon. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's entire history, including the nature and recency of the past infractions, alongside the provided character references, to assess overall reliability for carrying a weapon. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where an applicant for a Swiss Waffentragbewilligung, permit to carry a weapon, has a history of minor infractions. This presents a professional challenge, because the assessment requires balancing the applicant's right to potentially carry a weapon with the public safety mandate inherent in the permitting process. The decision-maker must meticulously apply the criteria outlined in the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons, Waffengesetz, and its associated ordinances, particularly concerning the assessment of reliability and the potential for misuse. A nuanced understanding of what constitutes a serious reason for refusal is crucial, moving beyond a simple checklist of past offenses to a qualitative assessment of the applicant's current character and risk profile. The correct approach involves a thorough, individualized assessment of the applicant's overall reliability, considering the nature, recency, and context of past infractions in light of the requirements for a Waffentragbewilligung. This approach prioritizes a comprehensive review of all relevant information, including the applicant's personal circumstances, any evidence of rehabilitation, and the specific type of permit sought. The legal justification lies in Article 10 of the WG, which outlines grounds for refusal, including a lack of reliability. The interpretation of reliability under Swiss law is not absolute but requires a holistic evaluation. A minor infraction, especially if distant in time and without recurrence, may not automatically render an individual unreliable for the purposes of carrying a weapon, provided other factors demonstrate their suitability and commitment to responsible weapon handling. This approach aligns with the principle of proportionality, ensuring that restrictions are justified by a genuine risk to public safety. An incorrect approach would be to automatically deny the permit based solely on the existence of any past infraction, regardless of its severity, age, or the applicant's subsequent conduct. This fails to adhere to the nuanced interpretation of reliability mandated by the WG and risks an arbitrary application of the law. Another incorrect approach would be to grant the permit without any further investigation or consideration of the infractions, effectively ignoring potential red flags and undermining the public safety objective of the Waffentragbewilligung. Finally, focusing exclusively on the legal definition of the infraction, without considering the applicant's personal circumstances, and any evidence of rehabilitation would also be an insufficient and potentially unfair assessment. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the legal requirements for the specific permit. This involves identifying all relevant statutory provisions and case law. Subsequently, they must gather all available information pertaining to the applicant, including their personal history, the nature of any past offenses, and any mitigating or aggravating factors. A critical step is to conduct a qualitative assessment of the applicant's reliability, considering whether the past behavior indicates a propensity for future misuse or poses a demonstrable risk to public safety. This assessment should be documented meticulously, justifying the final decision based on the evidence and legal framework. Question 18. Comparative studies suggest that the implementation of Switzerland's permit to carry a weapon, Waffentragbewilligung, hinges on a rigorous assessment of an applicant's demonstrable need. A private investigator in Zurich submits an application, citing the inherent risks of their profession and a general feeling of unease in certain neighborhoods where they conduct surveillance. They provide a letter from their employer outlining the general nature of their work and a personal statement detailing their concerns. Which approach best navigates the legal and ethical requirements for issuing a Waffentragbewilligung in this specific Swiss context? Option A. Thoroughly review the investigator's submitted documentation, seeking specific, verifiable evidence of concrete threats or a documented pattern of danger directly linked to their investigative activities that cannot be mitigated by other means, to determine if a demonstrable need exists beyond generalized professional risks. Option B. Deny the permit immediately because the applicant has not provided evidence of a direct, imminent threat to their life and general unease is not sufficient grounds. Option C. Request extensive personal financial records and a detailed history of all past surveillance operations to assess the applicant's overall lifestyle and potential for conflict. Option D. Grant the permit based on the applicant's profession as a private investigator, as this inherently involves situations that could pose a risk and their stated unease in certain areas. The correct answer is A. Thoroughly review the investigator's submitted documentation, seeking specific, verifiable evidence of concrete threats or a documented pattern of danger directly linked to their investigative activities that cannot be mitigated by other means, to determine if a demonstrable need exists beyond generalized professional risks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the nuanced interpretation of demonstrable need for a permit to carry a weapon, Waffentragbewilligung, in Switzerland. Applicants must prove a genuine and specific need beyond general self-defense, which can be subjective and requires careful assessment of evidence and circumstances. Misinterpreting or inadequately substantiating this need can lead to the denial of a permit, impacting an individual's perceived safety and rights, while an overly lenient interpretation could compromise public safety. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves meticulously gathering and evaluating all submitted documentation to ascertain if it clearly and convincingly demonstrates a specific, demonstrable need that goes beyond generalized concerns for personal safety. This requires a thorough understanding of the Swiss Federal Act on Weapons, Waffengesetz, and its associated ordinances, particularly concerning the criteria for issuing a Waffentragbewilligung. The applicant must provide concrete evidence of threats or circumstances that create a heightened risk, which cannot be adequately mitigated by other means. This approach aligns with the legal requirement to prove a specific need, ensuring that permits are granted only when justified by objective circumstances, thereby balancing individual rights with public safety. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to grant the permit based solely on the applicant's subjective fear for their safety, without requiring concrete evidence of specific threats or a demonstrable need. This fails to adhere to the legal standard of demonstrable need, as stipulated by Swiss law, potentially leading to the issuance of permits to individuals who do not meet the stringent requirements, thereby undermining public safety. Another incorrect approach is to deny the permit outright due to the applicant's profession as a private investigator, without a thorough review of the specific risks associated with their work and the evidence they provide. While the profession itself does not automatically qualify for a permit, it can, in certain circumstances, create a demonstrable need if the nature of their investigations exposes them to specific, documented threats that cannot be managed through other security measures. This approach is overly broad and fails to consider the individual circumstances and evidence presented. A further incorrect approach is to request additional documentation that is irrelevant to the assessment of a demonstrable need, such as personal financial records or unrelated background checks. This wastes the applicant's time and resources and distracts from the core legal requirement of proving a specific, elevated risk that necessitates carrying a weapon. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of the application process and the specific legal criteria. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a systematic and evidence-based approach. This involves clearly understanding the legal definition of demonstrable need within the Swiss Waffengesetz. When reviewing an application, the process should involve 1. Verifying the applicant's identity and background. 2. Meticulously examining all submitted evidence for its relevance and credibility in establishing a specific, elevated risk. 3. Cross-referencing the provided evidence with any available official information or reports. And 4. Making a decision based strictly on whether the evidence meets the legal threshold for a demonstrable need, rather than on personal assumptions or generalized concerns. Question 19. The investigation demonstrates that an applicant for a Swiss Waffentragbewilligung has a documented history of domestic disputes, some of which resulted in police intervention. The authorities are considering the application for a permit to carry a weapon. Which of the following approaches best reflects the legally mandated and ethically sound procedure for evaluating this applicant's suitability? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review of all available documentation related to the domestic disputes, including police reports and any court findings, to assess if the applicant's past behavior demonstrates a current risk of misuse or danger, in accordance with Article 10 of the Waffengesetz. Option B. Automatically deny the permit based on the presence of past domestic disputes, as such incidents inherently suggest a propensity for violence that disqualifies the applicant. Option C. Base the decision on informal reports and community gossip regarding the applicant's temperament, rather than formal documentation, to gauge potential future behavior. Option D. Grant the permit without further investigation, assuming that the applicant's past issues are resolved and do not pose a present threat, as long as no current criminal convictions are on record. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive review of all available documentation related to the domestic disputes, including police reports and any court findings, to assess if the applicant's past behavior demonstrates a current risk of misuse or danger, in accordance with Article 10 of the Waffengesetz. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a situation where an applicant for a Swiss Waffentragbewilligung permit to carry a weapon has a history of domestic disputes, some of which involved police intervention. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the applicant's right to apply for a permit with the public safety imperative mandated by Swiss weapon law. The authorities must meticulously assess the risk posed by the applicant without resorting to arbitrary denial. Careful judgment is required to interpret the nuances of the applicant's past behavior and its relevance to the current application, considering the specific criteria outlined in the Waffengesetz (WG) and the associated Verordnung über Waffen (WV) and Waffenverordnung des Bundes (WVEgb). The correct approach involves a thorough, individualized assessment of the applicant's suitability, focusing on whether their past behavior indicates a propensity to misuse weapons or pose a danger to themselves or others. This means gathering all relevant information, including police reports, court records, and potentially psychological evaluations, and then objectively evaluating this information against the legal requirements for a permit. Specifically, Article 10 of the WG outlines the conditions for refusing a permit, including if the applicant is known to be dangerous or if there is a risk of misuse. The authorities must demonstrate that the applicant meets one of these criteria based on concrete evidence, not mere suspicion or a generalized assumption based on past incidents. This approach upholds the principle of proportionality and due process, ensuring that permits are only denied when legally justified. An incorrect approach would be to automatically deny the permit based solely on the existence of past domestic disputes, regardless of their severity, resolution, or the applicant's subsequent conduct. This fails to consider the legal requirement for a demonstrable risk of misuse or danger. Another incorrect approach would be to grant the permit without a comprehensive review of the available information, thereby disregarding potential public safety concerns and failing to adhere to the due diligence expected of the issuing authority. A third incorrect approach would be to rely on hearsay or unsubstantiated rumors rather than documented evidence when making the decision, which undermines the integrity of the process and the legal basis for granting or denying a permit. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the legal framework. This involves identifying all relevant statutory provisions and case law pertaining to permit applications and grounds for refusal. The next step is to gather all pertinent factual information, ensuring its accuracy and completeness. This information should then be objectively analyzed against the legal criteria, considering any mitigating or aggravating factors. Finally, the decision must be documented thoroughly, providing clear and legally sound reasoning for the outcome, which is crucial for transparency and potential appeals. Question 20. Analysis of the fee structure for a Swiss Waffentragbewilligung permit to carry a weapon in the canton of Zurich. An applicant is seeking permits for 2 semi-automatic pistols. The cantonal regulation specifies a base fee of CHF 150 for permits related to handguns and an additional CHF 50 per permit issued. If the applicant also intends to apply for a permit for a hunting rifle, which falls under a different fee category with a base fee of CHF 100 and an additional CHF 30 per permit, how should the total application fee be calculated if they are applying for one permit for the hunting rifle? Option A. Use the fee schedule from the Canton of Geneva, which charges CHF 120 for all firearm permits. Option B. Calculate the fee based on the handgun permit structure for all weapons, as pistols are the primary focus. Option C. Apply a flat fee of CHF 200 for the first permit and CHF 50 for each subsequent permit, regardless of weapon type. Option D. Calculate the fee for the semi-automatic pistols by multiplying the base fee for handguns by the number of pistols and adding the per-permit fee for each pistol. Then add the calculated fee for the hunting rifle permit. The correct answer is D. Calculate the fee for the semi-automatic pistols by multiplying the base fee for handguns by the number of pistols and adding the per-permit fee for each pistol, then add the calculated fee for the hunting rifle permit. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in accurately calculating the required fees for a Swiss Waffentragbewilligung permit to carry a weapon application. The challenge lies in understanding the tiered fee structure based on the type of weapon and the potential for misinterpreting the applicable cantonal regulations, leading to financial discrepancies and potential delays or rejections of the application. Precise adherence to the fee schedule is crucial for lawful processing. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves meticulously reviewing the specific cantonal legislation governing weapon permits in the Canton of Zurich, identifying the exact fee applicable to a semi-automatic pistol, and then calculating the total fee by multiplying the base fee by the number of permits requested. This approach is correct because it directly applies the codified legal requirements for fee assessment as stipulated by the Canton of Zurich's weapon law. It ensures that the applicant pays the precise amount mandated by law for the specific type of weapon and the number of permits sought, thereby fulfilling all financial obligations for the application process. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves applying a flat fee without considering the weapon type or the number of permits. This fails to comply with the cantonal law, which clearly outlines a tiered fee structure based on the weapon category and a per-permit charge. This would result in an underpayment or overpayment of the required fees, leading to administrative issues. Another incorrect approach is to use a fee structure from a different Swiss canton. Each canton has its own specific regulations and fee schedules for weapon permits. Applying fees from another canton, such as Bern or Geneva, would be a direct violation of Zurich's cantonal law and would likely result in the application being returned for incorrect fee submission. A further incorrect approach is to estimate the fee based on a general understanding of permit costs without consulting the official cantonal fee schedule. This introduces an unacceptable level of subjectivity and guesswork into a legally defined process. The law requires precise adherence to the published fees, and estimation does not meet this standard, potentially leading to significant underpayment and application rejection. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a systematic approach to fee calculation for permit applications. This involves 1. Identifying the specific jurisdiction, Canton of Zurich in this case, and the relevant legislation. 2. Locating the official fee schedule within that legislation. 3. Accurately categorizing the item for which the permit is sought, semi-automatic pistol. 4. Applying the correct fee multiplier for the number of permits requested. 5. Double-checking the calculation against the official schedule before submission. This methodical process ensures compliance and avoids common pitfalls.